let's kick off. Welcome to the 78th, unbelievably, 78th FMBug meeting. Can't really believe it's that long. I say that every time. It still shocks me. So tonight we've got various talks. I think you all know the format by now. James, you may not know the format, but I'm sure you'll pick it up. It's very simple. We just have a few chats. Please, if you're going to present, just say at the beginning of your presentation if you want people to ask questions after, or if you're happy to be interrupted. I've remembered to shut up screen sharing, so you should be able to use it, I hope. The meeting's being recorded and will be available in our YouTube channel. It may take a little time this time, but from now on, Gary has promised me that he's going to have more time to do that sort of stuff. He's unfortunately can't be here tonight. He's got other things he needs to do tonight, which is quite unusual because I know he really enjoys the meetings too. But he'll go through the recording and catch up on everyone. So here we go. Meeting 78. This is the point I'd normally pass over to Gary and say, get on with the news, Gary. But unfortunately, he's not here to do that. So you've got me. And actually, our news doesn't really come from either Gary or me. The last two people who came in, Steve and Hackett. Yeah, basically the hard work on the news, that it's a little secret, is done by Penny mostly, and I think she gets some information from you, Christian, as well. I probably won't be as slick as Gary at presenting it, but I have got the news here. So when I can actually find the web page from the multiple of windows that are open on my machine, which has got the news articles on it, I will launch into it. Okay, so I'm going to share one of my screens. Yeah. Where's that gone? Not that one, not that one. That one, I think. So can you all see a screen that says Claris Community Live?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, you can't?
Yes.
Yes? Good. Okay, thank you. So this is the first article on the news. This one's a follow-up that Lion have produced on a community live event. If you haven't been to a community live event, I do recommend them. They're very good. But they did one on Bob Bowers did one, I believe, with Rosemary Tika and Connor Brock from Claris. And he's posted a little follow-up and some files about script transactions in FileMaker. I haven't had time to watch this particular one. Has anyone watched this one? Or anyone had anything to do with it? Who wants to pipe up and say, okay, file not. If you want any more examples of it, it's there. I'll put these links in the chat in a bit when I've got a moment. The next news item is another curl another one from Soliant, talking about the curl option. This is by Mike Duncan, talking about using the AWS SIGV4 in FileMaker, that curl option. I have no idea about what this is about because I've not had a chance to read the articles because I only got this last minute. So if you use AWS and this is something that's relevant to you,
Well, it's the option
It's-
to sign the request to the web service.
sorry, say that again, Christian. Sorry, I didn't hear.
It's an option to sign a request going to AWS.
Oh, okay.
So it's for the authentication to use the web service.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's is that in line with recent security changes?
No, this exists for years. Eventually, the option got into FileMaker. I mean, we had it in the plugin before.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's another idea they've stolen off you.
Not really. It's part of the curl project. Like
In a good way. I
and
say that.
several people solved this calculation before, and then eventually it came into the curl project and eventually into FileMaker.
Oh, excellent. It should be. Hi, Kate. Early for that. Hi, Kate. Nice to see you here. I'm just going through the news at the moment. So the next little one is so yes, if you want to read up about that, again, I will put this link into that. Looks like it's got a decent article. I will put the link into the chat and shortly. The next one is back on you, Christian. Would you like to talk about this one whilst we're here? This is little tidbits from the FileMaker conference.
Well, that's just a few things I picked up at the conference in Liechtenstein this time. So someone asked me about missing serial numbers, and someone else talked about why FileMaker can't export on the server, and well, and how many cores the CPU FileMaker server is using. I mean, little discussion things where I wrote down a few notes and put them into a blog article.
That looks pretty interesting, actually. I think that's well worth a read at the very least. Thank you, Christian, for your contribution there to the community. Next, I have something from Rome FileMaker Week, which I know John was at, and Ian. Please now joined us. So there's a blog here from the beeswax tune. Is that Vince or is that one of his? Yeah, I was talking about Vince. Yeah. So there's a blog here about Rome. Was Rome good? I gather it was, apart from a few colds going around.
Well, actually, you could have watched it live. At some presentations, we had more people watching it live than we had people in the room.
But
Wow.
nobody knew about it. Vince wasn't even there. He was remote.
Oh, there's Vince. There he is. Okay. Yeah, no, I did know about it, but unfortunately, I didn't get a chance. I would love to spend my time just actually not doing any development, just going to conferences and watching them online and watching articles online. I'd be happy if someone paid me to do it, though. It's not going to happen, is it? The Context podcast is the next thing on my list. This is Martha Zink. So this is about innovative projects utilizing FileMaker and web applications, discussing the challenges of offline data collection, the importance of authentication, the use of webhooks for data synchronization, etc., etc. And interestingly, Otto is mentioned in the project, which we're going to talk about shortly. And it looks like there's lots of interesting stuff there. Great podcast, by the way, generally. And I see Kate has joined us, who is the MD of Portage Bay. And the next item on my news list is Portage Bay Solutions FileMaker Devcast. Where have we gone? Here we go. Everything Claris FileMaker. Kate, are you in a position to mention that, or are you busy still preparing for
No, I'm here. I'm here. So I wasn't actually on that podcast, so I actually haven't watched it myself, to be completely honest. But I know it's going to be a great one. So we had Matt Navarre as a guest, and they were talking about everything JSON. So
Oh.
it's like a deep dive into JSON, and it's a video podcast as well.
I'm
So
going
you
to
can
watch that one because I love Jason stuff. So yeah. Thanks. Thanks for summarizing it for me. Save me reading through it and summarizing as I go. So Kate's going to present a bit later. She's going to talk to us a bit later. So we'll be back with you soon, Kate. We have Claris Talk AI. This is the next one Penny has sent me. Lots of interesting stuff in there about AI. Looks like my apologies. I really just haven't had time to go through this because I only got it late today. Because Penny has been worked on for week 2. Yeah, worth looking at by the looks of it. Very much worthwhile looking at, with links to lots of other stuff in there as well. Yeah, looks fascinating. And here's an idea that you might have missed, which I pointed out I introduced Penny to it ages ago, and she's been very kind and complimented me and said thank you to me for introducing her to it. It's not an idea I came up with at all, but it's this is an article on it. Single pass loop for handling errors in FileMaker. So if you've got a lot of if statements, it's very handy to switch that into a single pass loop with an exit loop if one statement at the end of it. So you only go through it ever once. It's a handy little technique for making your code a bit more readable. You have to do things slightly differently to get it to work, but I use it a lot now. I have done for quite a few years, because I got fed up with so many if then else statements, and it can get quite confusing when they get nested. But this is a great variant, and you capture the error whilst you're going through. So that this is the basic principle of it. So there's an article on there from Soliant about it. I can't even remember where I got it from. It was so long ago. So I'd love to credit the right person, but I can't. The only other piece of news is what's about to happen in 13 days' time. Is it 13 days' time? It's Engage You, anyway, in Malmo. So here we go. Malmo. Engage You. It's going to be a fantastic conference, and I'm absolutely gutted not to be there. And every time I look at news about it, or every time someone posts something about it, it just looks better and better. I went to the last one, as did Kate, and quite a few other people here. So I'm probably preaching to the converted. It's a fantastic event. I can't praise it highly enough. And just a credit for this little list from Christian, who's got a list of events for from the Claris event page, which I think are you picking that up directly from the event page, Christian?
Yes.
A great resource for finding out what the hell's going on in FileMaker. Excuse my language. What's going on in FileMaker, generally in the FileMaker world. And that's it about the news, but I will post all those links in the chat soon. James, are you ready?
I am indeed, yeah.
James, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. He was introduced to me by another James, who's a mutual friend. And he came up with this, he's come up with this great idea of slideshows within FileMaker, because we always don't know what to do with that image container issue. Well, we have many ways of dealing with image containers, but this is quite a neat way of handling that, I think. So James is going to talk about that. take it away.
Great, thanks very much. Right, let me just.
Are you all right, share? Do you need to screen share?
Yeah, I'm going to screen share. I think this is the right one.
Yep, that's
Can
working.
you
Yep, all
see
good.
it? It's great. Okay, great. Yeah, as I'm gonna kind of demo a couple of things that I've been kind of working on with FileMaker and particularly with images in JavaScript. But first I'll just talk a bit about me. I've been kind of working in FileMaker for about, I guess, 15 years now. I started I work with a private art collection, and they had a quite an old, terrible collections management system, and we were trying to trialing off the shelf products that weren't really working for our organization. And then I discovered FileMaker, started kind of playing around with it, building stuff as most people I think do with FileMaker, and yeah, ended up building something that the company got excited about, wanted to take it on, and I've been kind of growing it ever since. So yeah, I think we've now been using it for about 8 years, and it's slowly developed. We were kind of using it in conjunction with the dams that we'd purchased, and that also became quite clunky, and as often is the case with off-the-shelf products, that it showed a lot of promise and then didn't really deliver after that. So we kind of took over from that, and then started using FileMaker as our dams as well. And kind of since then been trying to develop a more image-centric approach to the FileMaker designs. Our users are very image-based. They want to see lots of pictures. They want to see them quickly, and we're currently kind of using it over the WAN, sometimes with a server that's located in Canada. So that also again poses a lots of latency issues. Yeah. So basically, I'll get into the demo now. But just before that, I'll put up some links. The first bit of the presentation is basically features datatables.net, which is a JavaScript library for those who haven't heard of it. Does a lot of heavy lifting for list view that I'm going to be demoing. Also, FileMaker magazine does a great walkthrough of data tables, which has been very helpful. And then there's also a small little blog post on scrolling, infinite scrolling with JavaScript, which you'll see later on with the gallery demo. So the issues I've been trying to solve with this are to provide a customizable list view. So our users wanted to be able to customize what columns they saw. They wanted it to be reorderable if possible, show and hide fields, all the things that I kind of tried to kind of fudge into a list view using kind of variables and hide calculations, but that yeah, it wasn't really working, and kind of in a way I guess they wanted what is effectively table view for this. So we tried to implement something that would fix that. We wanted to display images in a list view without a negative impact on performance. And gallery view with high fidelity images, again, not impacting on performance, and to build a responsive design that addresses some of the layout limitations of FileMaker. So what we came up with, this is a kind of demo version, but it's working over WAN of the collections management system we're building. It's still in kind of development at the moment, so forgive me if anything is a little bit funky. But yeah, I'm just going to do a search in here for now. So this is the list view that is leveraging data tables. You can see it's kind of pretty quick in pulling up, you know, almost 2,000 records. The response is great. The layout is responsive. It automatically kind of expands the row depending on the data and on the thumbnail. We can reorder the columns. We can also kind of show and hide the columns as users want to. We can also filter the results. So these results are kind of filterable. They don't affect the found set, but it's very useful if people want to kind of just dig around and dig into the records that they've found without actually kind of omitting anything. Then you can see a nice little summary that comes up here. And then we've also implemented a kind of checkbox setup where we can kind of do some batch updating tasks based on the user selection, and you can select all that sort of thing. But yeah, I think we found this to be extremely useful. There's a sort, like a fast sorting option here, which again for our purposes over the WAN, and with the latency coming from a server in Toronto, it's been it's looking very, very promising. And yeah, that's I'll just kind of go through very quickly how that is kind of working. So the first thing is to create a calculation, which is a JSON object that contains data you want to display from your records, which is here. The way I'm populating the thumbnails is a base 64 version based on a very small thumbnail derivative, which is a container. I also kind of put in a placeholder if there isn't an image for any reason, and it's a basic JSON object with the fields in, and then once a user performs a search, those JSON fields will be collected in a list view and converted to an array, so something that looks like this. And then that array is substituted into an HTML template, which I'll show you in a bit, which does a lot of the work and leverages all of the data tables library. I generally save all that data into a global field, and that's what is referencing the web view is referencing. So this is once the JSON array is created, then it's a very simple script. So I get the JSON row here. I put it into an array. I can end up saving it into a global, but that's not necessary. But sometimes, depending on the size of the data that is coming back, I figured it would be better to put it into a global. This is where I'm keeping the template as a global variable here, substituting the data in with the contents of that global field, and then setting a global field and with the whole package, and then putting that into the web viewer. So it's quite a straightforward thing. The code for that is here. So there's just these are the kind of the script links from data tables. They have a really good documentation online, so that goes through a bunch of functionality, lots of customizable kind of features that you can kind of turn on and off. Then there's some basic CSS here, but that is also a lot of that comes from the data tables CSS. And then here is basically the meat of it. This is where the data comes in. These are all where you kind of describe the data, where the path to that data, and what you want your column headings to be. This is defining where it's visible, or it's hidden as to begin with. And then some other kind of options here, whether you want paging, where you want the layout items, and whether you want fixed headers and things like that. So I've added some custom code here just to be able to kind of select an item. So like I can select a row and it will show the image with the details here, and that's just a pretty straightforward form script from the web viewer, just to go to the ID of the record ID. So that's list view that we put together. Then the next part of the kind of puzzle that we wanted to solve is a gallery view. So we put together this. This is working slightly differently. So this is leveraging the FileMaker data API, but we wanted something that showed bigger images. Before we were I was doing a sort of repeating field thing with containers, and it was a little bit messy and had lots of redundant fields. This is way more straightforward in a way once you've got the kind of HTML code down. But it's again, it's responsive, so it'll stretch to however big you want it. The images are nice and big. Everything formats really nicely, so whatever data you've got down here, it will wrap and resize. And again, you can kind of click in and out. And yeah, this kind of loads. When you get to the bottom, it will just spit out some more. It basically queries the data API, and yeah, works quite nicely. The way I'll just go through the code for this. So, like I said, this is kind of using the data API. I was trying to find a way to once a user has done a find, to query the data using the data API on just that found set rather than the whole database. I didn't really want to kind of capture the user's searches, especially if they were going to do kind of refines or extends. It was proving a little bit messy to kind of mirror that. So I decided instead to put a globals table and relate that to the UUID, the primary key of the main data table. This data table occurrence is just I keep the images in a separate table, so that's the reason why that's there. But yeah, the primary key field is connected to a field in the globals table, and then a layout based on the globals table contains a portal which holds all of the data that I want it to return back in the data API script step. So once a user performs a search, the primary keys are collected in a list, and then that's set in the global field, which provides that relationship to their found set in the data table. This is the call. I'm holding the offset and the limit in global variables. And that basically just forms the basis of the call. So yeah, you execute data API queries performed on the globals layout, and that returns the data for the found set. So actually, so when the data is returned, you reset the offset, and then you perform JavaScript in the web viewer, which is a function which adds cards, and basically takes that data, and all of that is done directly within the web viewer. It's passed as the parameter, so it's all done in JavaScript in the web viewer, and all that kind of FileMaker is doing is giving more data, which is actually very, very fast. So and yeah, this just has to be in a portal because of that relationship to the global table. So there's no other fields on that layout. It's just the portal data, and it just has whatever fields I want to display in the gallery view. The JavaScript function, which I'll show you in a minute, but that passes each object into an individual card div. So it will show the background image as a URL, and then the information that's coming back as p tags in a div. And I'll show you that. Yeah, so this is the code. So again, I'll save this in a global variable as a template. And in the beginning, it's blank. So once FileMaker passes the web viewer some data, it will call this function. So it gives that object data, that object array. It will just loop through that array, and for every array, yeah, it will create a card. So it takes all the variables and creates those divs and appends them, all those HTML elements, just appends them to a card, and then eventually adds that card to the gallery as a child div of the gallery. So again, that is all done very quickly as well. It's all processed within the web viewer, so it's all done on the client, and the only thing that is going out over the WAN is the data API call. I've got some of the kind of small things here, like a go to record function. When you get to the end of the cards and it wants some more data, it just performs a script, performs that load objects gallery script. So it does the same thing again, checks the offset, goes, okay, I want the next load of records now, and brings it back some data. So yeah, there's a little kind of throttle here just to make sure that it doesn't load records too quickly. But yeah, I think that's kind of about it. There's some basic CSS here, but all this was kind of custom stuff. Really But yeah, I think that's kind of everything. Probably a bit short actually. Sorry if it was a bit quick, but also if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to kind of go through.
James, that's fascinating. When you showed it to me a couple of months ago, I think it was now, I thought it was absolutely amazingly very useful and very quick. I did have one question. Is there a limit to the amount of images that you can get it to display and run smoothly?
Yeah, I've played around with the this seems to kind of go on for quite some time. I haven't reached the limit of it yet, but like it's loaded this number of records for now. I mean, I'm not sure. The users will be telling me, I'm sure, because I'm sure somebody will be going through and loading 10,000 images. But at the moment, I'm kind of I'm in process with testing what the limits are. But I imagine it will be kind of more to do with the limits of the machine that it's running and those limitations rather than anything else. With the data tables list view, I've kind of loaded over 10,000 records in one with images in one hit, and it seems it takes a bit of time to render all 10,000, but it's enough. It's a large quantity. The collection that I'm working on with this is enormous, and I will need to at some point come up with a kind of solution when someone returns 50,000 records. But again, I think that will just be I'm not sure whether anyone wants to look through a list of 50,000 records in a scrolling list, but I mean, I'm sure that will happen. Yeah. Somebody will moan about it for sure. So yeah, I think that will just be a case of showing them a limited list view without any images and ask them to refine their results to kind of get to a point where they want to see images.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. And how have you found the speed? Because I know one of your big issues is speed, wanting to keep everything quick.
Yeah, I mean it's a really tricky one. This is running off the WAN. This isn't a server this is a dev server in the UK. But so it's not running off the Canadian server. But it's still pretty quick. And for the users in Toronto, it's lightning fast. So it's very handy. And yeah, there's always a kind of a latency issue with the users in London, but that's I'm trying to get them to pony up for another server in London and replicate. So,
yeah, probably that's
I feel like that's the only way you're gonna get around it. So
yeah.
but I've been pretty pleased with the testing so far.
So anyone else got any questions on this?
I was going to ask a similar question to Jul, but about the data tables, because we've used them quite a bit and I really like it, but we have come into that performance like somewhere around 25, 30,000 records. It really takes a hit. And so I was curious, what you had, if you had any other ideas about how to approach, because data tables, it has that huge performance benefit and then it doesn't, right?
Yeah, and then it does. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think for our users, once they I mean, yeah, generally speaking, our users do search quite widely and get a huge set of results, and I'm sure they will complain to me if they can't see 20,000 records. But actually, in that sense, the use case for a thumbnailed list of 20,000 things, I think, becomes actually edge cases for our company. And I think that I think they'll be fine. At the moment, they kind of have a we've built a list view for them that they can kind of toggle the thumbnails off, which is just a container, but it's very laggy and it's not very nice, and the trade-off for that is not really good enough. So I think the way we'll get around that problem is to present them with a normal list view without any images. If it gets to 20,000 and have a dialogue, just say your results quite large, and if you refine more, then you'll be able to see the images. I think like it's not ideal, but I think for our use case, I think it's an acceptable trade-off. But
yeah, that's a good idea. My other question was about this gallery view. Did you consider ever, and I know it's similar, but the gallery add-on for file, there's that gallery add-on. It just made me think of it. At first I was like, oh, is the gallery add-on that he's using, but then I know you wrote your own. So I was just curious
I did play around with that. And I kind of ran into a few issues with it. I also the performance over the WAN actually when I was using it from the Canadian server kind of just wasn't good enough for large data sets. So once it loaded, it was fine, but actually getting there was a bit sticky. Whereas this is fine. The only lag you're going to get from this is just how fast the data API can give you back your data. So I just found it to be a little more responsive.
That's awesome.
Yeah, great. Anyone else got a question or a comment or whatever? I had the feeling you were about to say something else, James.
No, I was no, that's fine. No. All good.
Can you give us some sort of info on some of those things? Maybe post them in the chat before you. I know you've got to go early today, but you get a chance before you go to post some of the links or whatever in the chat. And
yeah, sure. No, absolutely. Yeah, we'll do for sure. Yeah, like I said, FileMaker magazine does a really good run through of the data tables JavaScript library. But yeah, I'll post all that in the chat, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, I know quite a few people are starting to incorporate JavaScript finally in their solutions. So is that something that people are doing generally? Can I ask a general question about that? Are people using JavaScript? Silence. Hands up. Do you want to stop screen sharing, James? Actually,
sure.
But a few of people then. There's at least one. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest,
yeah, loads of places.
Yeah, I thought so, Ian. Yeah. Okay, maybe I should have rephrased that question the other way around. Is anyone not using JavaScript in their solutions? I think it gives us a feel for it. That's great. That's fantastic.
Great, thanks so much.
If there's no more comments, we're slightly pressed for time, and I think we're almost on time. So thank you very much, James, for presenting that. That is fascinating, and it's really nice looking, and it looks good. So thanks.
Nice, thank you. Great.
Catch up with you later.
Yeah, we'll speak soon.
Okay. So that brings me on to the next topic, which is me. Oh God, me. Okay, it's me. So last time John came along and talked to us about Otto, which he's going to talk further on today after I've done my little bit. All I really wanted to say was but partly inspired by John, I went out and deployed Otto on a couple of servers, which was, as John was saying, pretty easy actually. It's more the more interesting issue was setting up the Linux servers, because I've a history of using Mac servers, so I've been slowly intending to migrate towards Linux servers, which I've been doing over the last few months, with most of my clients now when they need a change of server and any new clients. And I just really wanted to say, I think I'm probably speaking to a whole load of converted here, looking at a list of views here. So I don't really need to talk about how to do that. I will, if anyone's interested, do ask, and I'll just paste in my, or I'll probably make it available as a file, my notes on how to set up a Linux server, or what steps to go through with some of the commands that I use. Basically running it from terminals, a few little things in there, like you can't log in as root directly, but it's actually really good to be using the root account. So that sort of stuff. And other things now that I do as standard, which is install a web browser. I happen to use links too, but there are many out there. And how to change the host name. That wasn't actually that hard to do. Basically, the way I tend to operate is I use a company locally who have servers in a couple of server farms. So they're my providers, and they will just set me up a virtual private server somewhere with a basic Linux installed on it, of whatever version that I specify, and of whatever standard I specify. I did have to up the spec slightly for Otto because it is quite intensive. But I've done that, and John tells me that you can get a swap file installed automatically, but on Linux, but it's also very easy to do it manually. It's not hard at all. And so if you haven't done a Linux server, it's dead easy. There's an infinite number of resources out there. Go do it. The other thing I did want to share with you briefly is more of the Otto bit. So I'm just going to find a window to share and share that with you. What's that one? So hopefully that's visible now. I mean, this is just a very basic utility file that's not been changed for years, but it contains some information on various servers. So I've added a new panel in here, which tells me that I meet the requirements for my Otto deployment. It's keeping some key information in there. And because there's various numbers of steps that you've got to go through if you go to the Otto documentation, which is, by the way, absolutely fantastic. And you are quite right, John. You can practically do it in your sleep. I just listed the steps so that I know what steps to follow and what to go through, and to create a checklist of stuff for me to do. So you can all do that in your sleep. I think it's quite handy having that. It just means when I next do a deployment of Otto in a server, I will remember what I've got to do without having to work too hard at dragging it out of my memory.
Jul,
yeah.
Just a quick thing. I believe maybe you've been sharing only one of the windows, and so we don't see the card window.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right, Robert. Let me share that. Actually, I'll just switch to the layout. It's easier. Let's just go to that one. My apologies. You're absolutely right. Thank you for pointing that out. That's a rookie error. So yeah, these are basically the items that are on the Otto procedure list of things to do when you set up your server. and deploy Otto on it, and the information that you need, such as your key. So I can copy these by just copying one of these things. So I can copy the address of the server. It's done, which is down there. It's just a useful little tool. And I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to let John talk because he knows more about this. And I will say before I pass over to John that it's been a very easy exercise. I just haven't had enough time to do it, and the delays that I've had in doing anything with it have been mainly to do with my newness to setting up Linux servers. That said, having gone over that hill, it is really easy, and they're a joy to work with. So again, I will encourage people to do that. But get in touch if you're in the position of not knowing that much. I can give you my steps that I went through, and any pitfalls. John, do you want to take over before I waffle myself to death?
No, I think we liked watching you waffle yourself to death.
That's very kind of you to say so.
So let's go to here. So Jul came and said, "Oh, so last time I just did an introduction to Otto, but obviously the whole point is that as a ecosphere, there's lots of parts to it. So there's the bit you install on your server, Otto FMS. There's Otto deploy, which is a file that you use to run various migrations. There's simple queue. There's also a console for if you have multiple servers. So we're going to so it's great that, you know, if you're not up to speed with it, Jul's been off in the last 2 months and installed it and is coming along saying, oh, actually, it's really quite easy. So the thing is, what about the next bit, as opposed to it just being something that you install and have pretty effectively, as we showed last time, a pretty interface into things that the admin console can give you, but all in one space. So what we're going to look at is using it as the underpinnings to doing all kinds of migrations, and there are lots of different types of scenarios that you might use. We're going to look at definitely the first two, again, just to help people who've never played with it, get some kind of example as to how to what you're going to be looking at, what's in the dialog boxes, what you'll need to do. And in their language, the thing that's underneath all of this is a thing called a build. And what this diagram, which is ripped out of the help, is to do with the fact that what we're doing is automating things that we can in fact do manually. So each one of the steps, getting a file, creating a clone of it, moving it to somewhere else, running the data migration tool to replace the data, and then kind of reopening it. We can do all of those steps manually, but there are some advantages in the way that what Otto gives us, or Otto deploy it at the very least, to be able to automate it, so it's going to happen more predictably and more quickly. And also, if there's something goes wrong in the middle, it will roll back to where you were, instead of you running a big migration and then suddenly having to go, oh, actually it didn't work. I need to kind of jump back. And then as part of the whole thing about how it works, you can also run any script on any server as soon as it's finished. So you can deal with something about notifying yourself. So the patterns that I think that the two major patterns are about setting up something new for a customer, and this enables this in a great way. So if you have we'll call it a template file that you prefer to start from every single time, being able to just go, oh, let me just send that off to a server and have it there and open, ready to start development with. That's pattern number one. And then the other one is that one, which we've just seen, which is being able to update the file on some kind of production server with some new code, but the old or the most recent data. Now, while we kind of talk about the fact that it's from some kind of development server to a production server, all of this can absolutely happen just on the one server. So the issue is, as I kind of might have said last time or somewhere else, maybe you just never, ever need to be developing live ever again, because you can have your copy of the file on the same server, run the migration on the same server and stuff. There are more advanced things where you want to be able to make significant changes to the file which has lots of live data, but then get all of that live data back, so you're working with like real current records. Or if you've got any kind of vertical market product, essentially you're doing multiple versions of one of the above in one after the other. And what they're under the hood, what one of the key things that what this is doing is they've kind of found smart ways to create system scripts to do the tasks, but then use the admin console to automate running the script and then deleting the schedule as soon as it has completed. But what that means is that anything that I'm going to show now, you can set up as a deployment. That can be also pushed to a later time, because it can be hung off a script in the admin console. But it also could be something that you set up as a recurring automation. So do this at 3 in the morning every Saturday, just so that any work you've done all week automatically gets pushed out. But because it's using scripts in the admin console, you have to make sure that there is enough time for one of them to have finished before you try and start the other one, because you can't be running two migration scripts at the same time. It'll crash and it'll be a horrid mess. So to get Otto deploy, so Otto deploy is a FileMaker file that you use to manage the process. When you first log in to your Otto FMS console, on the dashboard tab on the left hand side, at the top there is a blue bar saying, oh, you can get Otto deploy onto this server, and all you do is click the button and it uses itself to bring a copy of the latest version of Otto deploy from wherever it is onto your server and open it. In the help documentation, it's got a default username and password and encryption key. At the very least, you need to change the username and password, because it will contain information that would allow somebody else to kind of do things on your servers. There isn't at the moment, as far as I'm aware, any automated way to change the encryption key. You have to kind of stop it, bring it down, change the encryption key and send it back. But at the very least, change the username and password. So what this file does is enable you to run a deployment on any server that has Otto FMS installed. So you can move this from this server to this server. You can move it to itself. You can move something from this server to that server over there, or you can also move it from that server over there back to here. Or you can move it from that server over there to a completely different server over there. You can be running Otto deploy on a server, and the files that you're moving are on 2 completely different servers. So if you have a lot of servers, you don't need to have auto deploy on every single server that you install. You just have, I think I have 3 copies across my whole estate for specific reasons. And obviously to make it run, you do need to have admin console credentials and admin API key that you set up from the Otto console itself. But that's pretty much all you need to do to set it up. Just going to show you what you get in terms of the detail that you get about after some kind of deployment is run. There's 3, you click into a deployment after it's done to be able to see the details. 3 buttons: summary, detail log, and build log. So the summary just gives you a list of, hey, here's all the things that happened. And because they've all got green ticks, it means we do know that they have been done. This is the line above. We've taken a template file and we've installed it somewhere else with a new name. That's what that has done. But look at the details. This gives you more of a clue about what's going on in the background. So you're sending off a request to the server, you're creating the build, you're moving some source files, which it moves it as a zip file. It's then unzipping it on another server, installing it, the file that it created in the first place. Now it's successfully moved. We can delete that file. We open the file. Once the file has properly opened, if necessary, you run a post-deployment script, and then you can kind of delete the file the file that you moved because it was all successful. The build log says, oh, these are the specifics of what kind of happened with the build part of that process. So you do get some very useful information. Obviously, it's mostly useful information if it doesn't work, as to why something kind of might have gone wrong. Let me click on the screen. There's this card window which we're going to look at in detail, which is where you set up some of the options for the migration that you're going to do. You do need an account, which is either, if you're doing some form of migration, you do need an account which is a full access account, credentials in the file, or an account which has the FM migration privilege set on. So it can be a more limited user account that can just do this job. But that's true to use the data migration tool. So if you're kind of moving a file, then you'd be entering some credentials, a bunch of options that are to do with the data migration tool. Do you want to use the user accounts from this source file that you're sending, or the destination file? And often, usually, it's the destination file, so that you can have your own user accounts in your development version, but when it gets to the other end, you're using the user accounts that the users are actually using. There's something which we'll talk about there about locale. So it is absolutely possible as part of this process to, particularly useful if you're working, as we do across Europe, if you have customers who want the file to be a French version file or a German version file in terms of things like how dates and numbers and times are set up. You can specify in a drop down there what the locale of the destination is, which is a whole very interesting thing, because when you work with Linux, you can say, oh, I would like the locale of this installation, this VPS to be German, but it doesn't automatically mean that taking a FileMaker file over there and opening it is going to turn it into a German file. You have to force it. If you, in this drop down there, if you use English, it's actually English American, and you have to use an external file. Maybe we'll get a chance to show that in a minute. If you want it to be English. But while we're doing this, we can also install a file that we're talking about in a folder that doesn't yet exist, for example, which is kind of what I have done there. So I think that may be all the slides. Let's maybe try and do a bit of demoing. Is this the right one? So got FileMaker open here. So the first thing you need to do is to have your list of, you need to add at least one server. I can show you this one because this is about to get destroyed in a few days. So you're going to put in the server URL, test that it can be reached, and it will tell you what version of FileMaker server and what version of Otto is on there. Give it your own label, and then you need an admin API key, which you get by going into here, and at the bottom you need an admin API key. So what you need to do is this is a server admin console credentials. You put in the username and password, give it a label, and you create a key. In the admin console, it's slightly obscured, but you can copy that key into this dialog here. If any of these bits aren't working when you click save, it will kind of go, yeah, it doesn't quite work. That's how simple it is to set up your servers. So I thought what we'd do, let's do the simple one first, because we can just prove that it works. So button at the top right to create a new deployment. You do have to give it a title. So and then you select where you're going from and where you're going to. Okay. So that's the first bit, from this server to this server. Like I say, doesn't matter that this auto deploy is potentially on an even different server. So let's start with, you can either start here with this blue button or this blue button. Set up default file options. So this is where we're going to just put in some credentials. Like that. I'm going to click a button there. At the bottom, I'm just going to go, it's going to go in the default, but I'm going to put this into a folder, FMBug, which I'm pretty sure doesn't exist. And we'll leave the rest as it is. Save those. Now I need to add a file. So what I'm going to do in this particular case is I'm going to take this template file. So clearly what that's done is it knows what files are currently open on that server, okay? Because obviously the admin console API can give us that information. So you don't have to sit there with pens and paper and a manual list. It's all doing it for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this file, and the operation I'm going to do is, and I have two choices here. It's a straight off install. If the file is not currently there, it will install it. If it is currently there, but I want to replace it, that's what the second option will do. And what I'm going to do is just change the name. Okay. There are options in, so I'm just literally going to move, I'm going to move that template file onto a different server and give it a new name. Okay, that's all I'm going to do at this moment in time. I'm happy that those are all the pieces. I've got the username and password that's going to work. I click the button to review it. That's what it's going to do. It's going to move from here to here. It's going to take this file, rename it to that, and we'll just click start. It says it's started running, so I can go back to here, but that I can't see it actually running in Otto deploy. I have to be in the console, and as you can see here, this is where I'm moving the file to. The deployment is currently in progress, and now it's finished. It's taken about 30 seconds to move a file from where it was to here and rename it. And so if I go down here, here it is sitting there, FMBug_1, opened, moved and opened and renamed. And if I look at the file manager, looking at live databases folder, under default, there is also now, has it made a folder? No, it hasn't. I don't know why that is. Bad demo. But anyway, there is the file. So that's how simple it is to go, I've got a template file. So when you've got a brand new customer project, you just go, I'm just going to move this onto this server, call it this, and I've got a known starting point. It's got things like scripts and custom functions and various other things in it. That's it. I mean, for a demo, it's like, well, it works. There you go. Spent 10 minutes watching John make it work. I'm sure I can copy that. So let's do the next thing, which is to go to that, and it's that file there. So I'm just going to open it, and all I'm going to do is just change the color of that icon. And change that. Okay. So this is the file. This is now my live customer file. Okay. So there are some changes to the live customer file. Okay. So I do some work in the template file to update the code, and I now want to do the second type of migration where I'm moving the code, but keeping the data from here. So what I need to do is to go to a layout in which there is a globals layout. I'm just going to fill this with, that won't work. Yes, it will. I think it will. Let me just check if I go back into that. It will have saved that. No, because it's not a global field. So that's, I think this one will do. That's not a global field. Okay, so we made some changes to the data in this file. So what I'm going to do now is the second type of deployment, which is I'm going to, from the same place to the same place, I'm going to take this file and now then, so I just put in the file name manually there, but now I have a new option. So it knows that this file exists on the server we're sending it to. So I've now got more than one option. I could just straight out replace the file. So don't select that if that's not what you mean to do. Okay, in this case, what I am going to do is choose this option here called migrate. So it's going to take the code from the original template file and move it into this new file that I've just made. I need to go and put in these again. Make sure I type that right. And click save. So what we would expect to now happen is that this file that I kind of moved onto a new server, I added a bit of data, but I also changed the logo icon at the beginning. The logo icon isn't data, it's schema. So what's going to happen is, what I'm going to expect to see when it's all done is that the logo icon that I changed at the beginning is set back to how it is in the template file, but that the data that I just modified would be saved. So this is where I can schedule this for later. What this will do is it will create a schedule in your list of schedules that it can run later, and once it's run successfully, it'll remove it. But we're not going to do that because we want to demo it. So there we go, it's all happening. So if I go to here now, I can see that a deployment is in progress, and it's a deployment FMBug 2, it's the second deployment. It tells me the stage it's at currently is building. It's now migrating the data, it's now doing the migration. Anything that happens after the deployment is now done. Obviously, really simple case, but it only takes 30 seconds. But if I go back to the file, then certainly it's moved my new code across. But obviously, I would expect now that it's kept the data that I changed with new data. Okay, so that's that's a demonstration of how the data migration tool works. It's just this is a layer in the front of it which is kind of automated it all. So obviously there's a few things to do, but it does show how easy it is, and the fact that it's now saved this as a deployment. So this deployment here, I can just run again. So if I make some more changes to the code, I can just come back into here. I don't have to set it up again. It's saved it. So I can just come back to here. It's got all the things that I had before saved. I can just review and deploy again and make it work. Okay, presumably that should be easy enough for people to follow. Hopefully there's enough of a demo here. So I thought what I'd do for the third little bit is there's also so this is like doing it as you might normally do it, but there's another very interesting use case, which is to do with generating the build but not actually doing anything else with it in the short term. So I'm going to create a new build from this server. And I'm going to give it an ID. I'm going to add a file. I'm going to add this template file to the build. I can run a script before the build happens. I can overwrite any files that have got this same build ID. Closing files during the build. So the interesting thing about this is if you do a data migration, during the period that the data migration is happening, obviously the file is closed. But what you don't want is anybody else to be opening another file that references it, because obviously the data won't be found. So if somebody turns up when you're in the middle of the migration and tries to open another file which references this one, it'll get in a horrid mess. So you can select to close other files during the time that the migration is happening, and have it open as soon as it's all done. But what we're going to do with this is we're just going to do the first part of the process. So we're going to review that, and I'm just going to start the build part of the process. So it's generating a zip file. There we go. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to download this build file, which is going to download onto my hard drive. Okay. And what it contains is a zip file and a file called manifest.json. You need both of those files, but I can now put those files anywhere that's publicly accessible. So what I am going to do is put them. I did test it before just so I knew that this was all going to work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it somewhere on a bit of my website so that I can access it. Okay, so that's uploaded. So that is now sitting waiting to be used. Close that as a deployment. Okay. So if I make a new deployment and I select, rather than selecting the source as being from one of the servers I have, I create a build URL. So this is how to get to that file from the internet. So you need to point to the manifest.json file. That JSON file is just a list of instructions as to what to do. That doesn't seem to love that because it should be that instead. There we go. So it can get to the URL. I'm going to move that template file to here, same new server. When I now click add files, it's going to read the information that's in the manifest JSON as opposed to reading the data on the server. And because I'm just moving one file in the zip, I can select that and then just proceed FMBug 2. We're going to do an install, and I'm going to review and deploy. And here, this tells me that I did something that's slightly idiotic in the first part of the build, which is I'll show you where that comes from. I'm just going to quick review and deploy so we can kind of move on. Fix the errors. First,
rather than FMBug, but I'm sure it doesn't matter.
No, you need to give it a name. Otherwise, it's going to go, no, you can't do it, which is what that error was about. So there we go. Thank you very much. Start that now, and I'll just return. So what I've done here in this build is that at the bottom of this dialog, by default, it's set to clone the file as yes. So because I left that as yes, it clones the file. But as it's my template file, I don't really want it to clone the file. I should have selected that as no. That's a little thing that might trip you up if you are not aware of that. But if I go back to this server, you'll see that's happened. Go back to the server list, and I've now got another typo, FMBug_2. So this is the one I've created from the build. So rather than have to go through the 2 steps of the process each time I want to move the template, I can just go, oh, template's sitting on this bit of URL somewhere, go off and bring it down. The reason why that is useful is if you're doing something where the second part of the process, which is either moving the file in, less so, but doing the migration, is you want to have the minimum amount of downtime for somebody, is you do it in 2 stages. You do the build first, move the build to somewhere, which obviously Otto will do automatically for you. But if you move it to somewhere, then literally at the point when you're ready to go, you can just run the migration from the build, and then all of the user's experience at the far end is the actual migration part of it. And obviously the file has to be closed for that. So let me stop doing that and open it up to any questions that people have.
Thanks, John. That's fascinating. That's I've got about halfway through that, I think, in my deployment so far, and in my implementation of Otto. It's really good to have that that shown so clearly.
I think it was said last time, the documentation is really extensive, and having had it demoed like just once now, you should be able to go and follow the documentation yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I'm finding the documentation very easy and clear. Yeah.
Cool.
I do have some questions, John.
Yes, Robert.
So let's assume a setup where we would have like dev and staging and prod, right?
Yes.
Because you've described the migration, and I was curious as to the way to specify something like that in Otto, right? To say, like, I need to refresh my staging with the code that is from I'm sorry, dev, but also refresh it with the data that comes from production. So is this something that can be specified in a single migration, or would you have to sequence like a migration
Yes.
to?
So,
Yeah.
so what I didn't show, so let me just really quickly show it. When we get into here, is that if we build a deployment, so I'm just going to build a new deployment. We're going to go from here to here, which is the first thing we just did. I'm going to add this file, so that's my new code from there to there. Okay. Now then, I can go to the button up here, which says use advanced options. And then suddenly there's now like a whole load of stuff appeared. So this is we'll call it total. And this first part, it's just the equivalent of a single thing. But I can add another deployment as part of the package. So what I'm now going to do is go, okay, now I want to use a different source. So in this case, let's just say I want to use data from there. And in this case, I'm going to add that, use that one because it's built on a template. I'm going to just quickly add those, but then this is that's going to say it's a migration. But effectively, what you do is you build up the pieces that you need. Okay. So what you do first is that you move the live data onto your staging or test server. Okay.
Okay.
And then the second part is that you take your new code and you do a migration onto your test server, but use the data that's now on the test server. Okay.
Right.
So you moved your data from the live server to your test server. Then you moved the code into the test server and did a migration. So now what your test server has is new code, but also latest data. Okay. So that you can do tests, the testing that you need to do with like proper real live data. Excuse me.
Thank you. And when renaming, do we know if that is using the developer tools to rename, or is it just like rewriting the file name like the way the OS would do that?
I wish I knew the answer to that question, but I don't.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. And also just so it works regardless of the server like flavor, or is it only Unix and not Windows and Mac? Or
no? So this would, I could demo that. I basically only have Linux servers for customers. I have a Windows server that I keep for test purposes, and I have a Mac server in my house, just for like proper testy stuff. But they're not with any production things. But yes, as long as Otto FMS is installed, it's Otto that's doing the stuff. Otto knows how to talk to the operating system that it's on. So it absolutely does not matter at all what the flavor of any of these endpoints is. It just doesn't care. It's in the same way that when you log in with FileMaker to a FileMaker server, you absolutely don't care what flavor the server is on, unless you need to do something as a PSOS script, in which case you do need to care. But for general use, you actually don't need to care at all. So.
And I know it was not really part of what you meant to demo today, but you said something about webhooks. Do you think you could share us like a quick screen of where that's defined in there, or?
I can do that as long as just go back into here, go into here. So in the Otto FMS console, down here on the left, there's a thing called webhooks. Okay, so let me just. So this has non-registered right now. So I'm going to do one. That won't necessarily work. So let me show you one where I know there are loads. So here's one that has absolutely loads of webhooks. Okay, to set up a webhook really quickly, you say register a webhook, select the database that it's going into, this one here. It's picked up the API key in this installation I've already got, but you can use multiple API keys. The channel placeholder is the part in the URL that you send the webhook to that's specific. So let's make it FMBug. So then this, that's a really irritating bit of, apparently it doesn't love FMBug in spell check.
It needs to love FMBug.
So if I now copy this whole webhook, that's what I would paste in the thing that's sending webhooks. It's going to this address, to the Otto inbox file / this part, which is the channel. So what it does in the inbox file is it creates a record with the payload of the data in the payload field and the channel in the channel. But that is literally all you have to do to set one up. But it's in the webhooks. Once you have, I can do this with this one because this doesn't kind of matter. If I click test here, here's one I've set up. If I send a webhook to this file, it's going to go, yep, that's fine. And if I went off and looked at the inbox file, there'll be a test record sitting there on this particular channel. Does that help?
Absolutely. And one last thing, if I may, you had mentioned the source server and the destination server can also be one and the same. It's just
yes, I'm 100%.
So, and what's the use case? Because a single file can only, like, you cannot have two files having the same name on the same server. So
yeah, but
I'm just a bit puzzled.
But that's a ridiculous thing to even consider doing. However, I have something which is a product kind of thing, which I use with several of my higher education institutions that I have on my server, their version of the file. So it's like a little vertical market thing, but it's all on my server, okay? So, but I want each of my customers to have, whenever I make modifications to the code, I want each of the customers to have the code. So I develop on my server the base file, and then I have migrations which will do exactly what that's doing a data migration, but as part of the data migration, it's saying I'm going from this file here to this file called this over here. So I have a multiple migration where I just basically copy the new code to 3 files, each of which contains separate student data for 3 separate customers, but it's all on the one server. So it absolutely does not have to be on another server. So my point is that if you're starting with some kind of file, then as long as the file is called something different, it doesn't matter what your development version of the file is called. As long as it's not called the same thing as the live version of the file, then you can therefore be doing live coding in your demo, in your test file, but your test file happens to be on the same server as the live file. And when you need to do a migration, you just set up an auto deploy migration and move it from your development version of the file to the other file, which just happens to be on the same server.
That's
Awesome.
great.
Thank you,
John. And thanks for the interesting questions as well, Robert. We're a little behind now, so I don't know if you're up to staying for a bit later, John. If anyone's got any other questions,
No.
If you are, that'd be great. I'd like to move on to Kate, who I suspect might have a question for you as well. So if it's all right, I will hand over now to Kate, who is Managing Director of Portage Bay. I will let her introduce herself. She's recently done a, mine's gone blank. What did you do recently? With Claris.
Claris Community Live.
That's the word. That's the word I was struggling for. Thank you, Kate. Yeah, that was fascinating. I watched that. It was really interesting. So take it away, Kate.
Okay, thank you, Jul.
A question first, if you had one.
Yeah. John, a quick question. I was curious if you have tried Devon and how you think Otto compares with Devon.
No, I haven't tried it. I'm interested to see where he's got to with it as a tool when we go to Malmo in a few weeks' time, because I know he's presenting on it.
Yeah.
It's a slightly different beast because it came from a different place. Because their team is a bit smaller, it's been quite slow to develop. So if it's something that you're using, a lot in your active work. You want to be using something that's a finished product, not something that's still in beta. So that's one reason I haven't jumped into it. But I'm interested to see where he's got to with it at Malmo,
Yeah.
and be able to compare the two things, really. So.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, I'm interested to learn more about that too. So thank you. Okay. And now, yes, my daughter just got home from school, and so we've got a little, she wants me to get stamped.
Do you want me to? Oh, hi, Maya.
Can you stall for me for 1 minute? I'll be
Of
right
course, I
back.
can stall for you. I met Kate at the at Engage U last year, and lucky to have done so, I think. She's that's her daughter. I also met, and she's a very interesting person and does lots of stuff to do with Connect. Was her last community event live. It's fascinating. She was talking about some use cases for it. I'm not entirely sure what Kate's going to talk about tonight. I'm hoping she's going to provoke a little bit of a discussion. I don't think she'll be very long. If she is, Doug, are you okay for time?
Yeah, my day is done, so I can stay on.
I didn't think you'd be long,
Okay.
Kate. Managed to waffle.
I'm sorry about it. With like the timing. Okay, so yes, thank you for that kind introduction, Jul, and it's just one of those days. I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, I was gonna talk a little bit more about Claris Connect, and I thought I was debating what to talk about. And it was last year that custom connectors came out, and we have one free custom connector on our website for ZotoSign. It used to be called EverSign, now it's ZotoSign, but it's a signing service, similar to DocuSign. A little bit more affordable than DocuSign. And so we built a custom connector, and we're, giving it away. But I realized I never wrote part 2 of the blog there, which was demoing how to use the connector. So I finished up my demo file, and I just wanted to review that and kind of go over that and talk about how you integrate custom connectors with Claris Connect. So let me share my screen here. So this is the demo file that I built. And before I go into the flow, actually, let me just talk a little bit about, like I mentioned, ZotoSign is this service. So they have an API, and then basically, it gives you this whole way to like send and receive documents, right? And then have them digitally signed. So for the custom connector, so Claris Connect didn't have a connector for ZotoSign. So this is where I built the custom connector. And I'm not going to go into the details about how to build the custom connector, but it's very well documented with Claris. I mean, it's basically a JSON template that you're going to use to start with, and then you're customizing it based on the authentication required by the API and which endpoints you want to use. So you need to be familiar with JSON to build a custom connector. And then I'm using the API documentation. This is ZotoSign's API documentation to get the endpoints that I want to reference. So I'm basically building whatever I want and whatever I want to put in there based on what's available with the API. And then, so I built my custom connector, and then the custom connector, when you go and want to share it with somebody, it's just the JSON. So it's just a piece of text, right? And you just copy and paste it. So if you want to create a new custom connector, you would just hit new custom connector, delete all that, and then paste your code. This is the blog post, which is at the bottom of it. You can download our the JSONs. Okay, I guess nobody else can hear that. So that's the gist of creating the custom connector. I don't have any stamps right now. Okay, so moving on.
Is she interrupting your flow too much? I can get Doug to talk first if you want, or you can carry on. It's great. It's nice and relaxed. So
I'm trying my best here. So oh my gosh. You know what? Let me put a pin in it. Doug, do you want to go first? And I need to go find some stamps. I think it's gonna help. And then I'll swap with you. Is that okay if we mix
no
things
worries.
up for a second? I'm so sorry. I apologize and appreciate everybody's flexibility.
And that's why I put my kids in the cellar, so that way I have got no issue with them. So
I'm going to let Doug. Everyone knows Doug. I'm going to let you just go on, Doug.
Oh, okay. Let me just close this. Not slipping anywhere. Hi everyone. So I am going to talk a bit about the next update that FileMaker 21 that we're going to be releasing very soon. Not going to go too much into details. There's a couple of stuff that I kind of like what we've been able to actually sort of do. A lot of it is basically based on feedback from the community. So when we try to do the V1 update after the major release, is listening to developers, to the feedback from a lot of people, and people actually sort of bring something that's going to work for you and that you're going to be able to, or actually want to use and actually be able to actually install it inside your company. So I'm going to share my keynote. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of a demo I built. There it goes. So essentially, basically, we're calling FileMaker 2024 V1, which is FileMaker 21.1. We call it like a minor update. It actually has a lot of new updates inside it. Essentially, the update that's coming out very soon is for FileMaker Server, FileMaker Pro, and Go. There will be a FileMaker Cloud update. It's going to be scheduled to come later in the year. That has pretty much all the updates that we put in FileMaker Server. In terms of the amount of fixes that we've put, improvements, we've got about 309, I would say, tasks inside of issues inside of our product management app of things that we've actually sort of fixed, or in other cases improved, so that it actually does work for you. Like everything, it's going to be able to anyone who's got an active annual contract, anyone that's got a maintenance contract, or anyone that's actually bought a finished good version of FileMaker 2024 will be able to actually sort of get a copy of the update. The position that we're having is, because we're actually doing so many improvements, 21.1 actually kind of becomes a big update for us in terms of how we've done updates in the past. This one has a lot of stuff inside it. We're trying to be able to, in the release note, give you as much information as we can so that everything that you want to know is actually kind of there. But if you have any questions on specific areas where you think we've done some updates but you haven't seen everything, you can sort of email us or call us and we'll give you the extra information. A lot of the stuff that we did in FileMaker 2024 when we released was around AI. And the idea with this update was to be able to bring more say feature or be able to actually use more LLMs in the background to be able to actually do more stuff with your solution. So what we did essentially is working on making semantic search kind of getting better, and especially be able to do semantic search both on text or on images. And in text, it's kind of straightforward. Image, it takes a bit more horsepower from the machine that you need to do. But once you've actually got it working, it's actually very kind of nice to actually have it. I'm going to give you a quick example. So while I was actually sort of doing some research on how we could actually sort of explain what could be done with semantic search on images, the biggest problem that I had is actually finding a library of images on the internet where there was enough images so that I could build something that actually of interest and not just have a non-interested basically process. So I found for the company called Unsplash, they provide a open source, unlimited usage library of about 25,000 images, where I use the new, well, I actually using the image LLMs that we provide with our script basically on the server to be able to actually sort of go through the images, create embedding, and be able to actually do some searches. So essentially, all you have to do is look at the engineering blog to be able to install a OpenLLM on your machine. If you have a MacBook, it's going to work really nicely. If you have Windows, you need a specific type of Windows machine, or you can use AWS or any providers. But if you have a MacBook, like pretty much everyone, it's going to be quite straightforward to install it. Once you're running the Python script, it's going to download all the necessary models that you need. And there's one specifically for images that's going to be able to actually sort of go through this stuff. In terms of the script, it's actually very straightforward. All you need to basically is connect your LLMs. I'm running on my machine, so it's on my local host. There's a way not to actually have to use an API key because you have to do some stuff on the PKI, which is a bit of a pain. But for testing, you just need to actually do some changes on the Python file and you'll be able to use it without an API key. And then so once you have your API key, you can actually just basically insert the embeddings for all the images that you have. The bundle that we use is called Clip VITB32. I think there's a L14 we use as well. It's an open AI compatible clip model. Kind of works nicely. You can do some nice cool stuff. And then you just create your script to be able to do a semantic find. And that's really kind of cool. So what I was actually playing with it basically is the one thing that I did notice is once you actually have images, if you haven't done like keywords or you haven't got a proper name for a file, it's actually kind of very hard to actually sort of find. And when I was playing around with it, and this is basic information coming from the photographer themselves. So they've actually took the pictures, they actually provided to Unsplash. They give keywords, which sometimes have absolutely no relation to the image, and then they give it a name or sometimes a description. In most cases, it's a name. And like everything, because it's human driven, you're going to make mistakes. So when I was playing around with it, I was looking at pictures of cats because that's what the internet loves. And then when I started going through it, I noticed that they actually had a picture of a kitten where they actually misspelled the name. And so if you do normal sort of FileMaker searches, it's not able to actually find those kind of words. So basically is if you have stuff that's been misspelled, you're not going to be able to actually sort of find it. Whereas with semantic search, exactly what it's doing, it's actually looking at the images and it's going to be able to find anything. So if I just type in kitten, and I've limited basically my request to, I think, 25 records, it's going to be able to actually find it. So it should be somewhere in there. There you go. It's basically there. So with semantic search, I'm able to actually find the record that I'm looking for, even the information that I have actually stored in my text field or number fields, are actually the wrong ones. And then you can actually go crazy because you can ask for anything. So the one test that I did, which was a mountain peak, in the early hours of the morning, and it's going to find you nice pictures of mountain peaks in the morning with the sunrise. So it's actually kind of cool, and you can do a lot of stuff with it. And that's the angle where basically in terms of semantic search, we're really trying to actually get like developers to start sort of leveraging it, because when we show that, and I've showed that to a couple of customers, they kind of go, oh, okay, cool. I had no idea what I could do with AI. I'm not necessarily going to use it maybe for this specific kind of example, but I'm actually going to start looking at how I could actually sort of do semantic search in my apps, because it's going to allow me to find those records where previously my data, which was mainly inputted by human beings, wasn't done properly. And so this was going to allow me to be able to actually do many things around that. And you can see is basically it's actually very quick. It's looking through 25,000 images. And so speed-wise, it's been improved even in the latest release. Share crops my, on this one, Keynote. So the thing we've been working on is to make sure that it's fully macOS, Sequoia, and iOS 18 and iPadOS 18 compatible. There was a couple of issues, I think, at first around flickering. Those have actually been fixed. It works as well with the latest update of Sequoia, that 15.1, and then the one from iOS. It's not linked to anything around Apple Intelligence. Essentially, is because that Apple Intelligence is pretty much a US market for the time being. We're going to wait to see what we can actually do with it. But once it's global, we'll actually do more stuff with the Apple Intelligence inside of FileMaker. The one thing we actually did, which is kind of nice, is we finally removed the limits on the data API and OData. So currently on a FileMaker contract that you have a limit of 2 gig per user per month. So that gives you 24 gig for the year. You multiply it by the time of user that you have, and then it gives you your tally for the year. But the big issue that we had is because we're actually putting this limit, we had a lot of people just going I'm not going to be able to actually test it or even play with it because I have no idea whether I'm going to get that to that limit very quickly. And if I do, I've got to basically buy extra OData or data API add-ons. And it's a pain because I don't know how many you actually need. So we had a lot of customers who were just like, I'm going to stick basically with the PHP API because that way it's a lot easier to actually manage. With this removal, you can actually now fully use the API as much as you want. You can have a Node.js, a web server in front of it, and then you can create really nice web pages talking directly to your FileMaker solution. So we're hoping with this, it's going to start sort of making it easier for people to start leveraging a bit more the data API and OData. Open quickly again is a feature where we've actually been heavily sort of responding to the queries from developers. So essentially on V1, you could only search inside it sort of one way of looking in it. So you had like tables and a couple of scripts. It wasn't ideal. It was a V1. It was fully accessible to everyone. So whether you had like limited usage to the app or you were the full admin, everyone can actually have the same access to it. So it was creating a lot of issues. And we thought, let's see how I can actually work around it so that we can remove the hurdles. Let me see if I can quickly. So I'm going to share my FileMaker. So essentially the way it works now is, or if you haven't used it, same as Spotlight, you do Apple Care on your Mac, and then you can type stuff. So if I type for AI, it's going to basically group the result based on layout, scripts, fields, table occurrences or tables, everything you can see. You can select it to actually have it looking at the file that's basically in the foreground and not actually in the background. So you have a bit more control over that. There's a close button on top of it. If I do contact, no, there's not going to be contact. Let's try keyword. You can see it basically it's going to come up with layout, keywords in tables, in the fields, and table occurrences. If I double click on it, it will basically take me to the area that I'm looking at. The other thing that we did is if you're doing searches when you are in the relation database, it's going to look basically everything that's in there. So if I do Apple Care and an item, it's only look basically it's what's on the screen. It's not going to go everywhere around the file, which is kind of useful. And to make it even easier for you to actually have control over the app, in the security systems, we've actually created a new option which basically is allows you to actually limit basically the access to the layout and the scripts from users. So you're going to have to, the only thing is you're going to have to recreate a new privilege set because you won't be able to actually update any of the 3.1 actually Claris creates. But if you create a new one, you'll be able to actually disallow access to the open quickly, to the layout and the scripts for various users. So there's more stuff that will be coming in later versions, but essentially that's what we're actually sort of working on. Discard, go back to my keynote. The other thing we did is HTTPS tunneling now is available on Mac, Windows, on Linux, and on FileMaker Cloud. It's still a manual process, both on the Pro and the server. So you can kind of do some automation on the server because it's working now with the admin API, but on the Mac, basically, it was control through the preferences. So that's what you can actually set up and same on the go. We've made some improvements to the server administration. So we've given you tools to be able to control how you want to create subfolders, how you want to do scheduling. I mean, it's basically a lot of pain removers that actually sort of remove for you based on your feedback in other cases. The one area where we basically focus on is making sure that we aim the changes that we do, the enhancements on two kind of big groups, essentially developers and IT administrators. We want to make it easier for developers to be able to create better apps, but we want to make it easier as well when you're having conversations with IT management to be able to actually remove the hurdles of going is FileMaker is outdated, it doesn't do this and this and this. You can go and say, well, basically, I've got all the tools, I've got all the security guidelines, all the specific things that's going to allow you to get FileMaker to run in your organizations. And so we're trying to actually remove as much of the hurdles that we created in the past to make your life a lot easier when you have to deploy a FileMaker in larger organization or more secured environments. The one thing we actually sort of did as well for the AI side of it is adding a new support for Cohere. The one thing which is kind of nice is they have a free version. So it has a bit of limits where you can actually do like the tokenization system that they have means there's a kind of a limit when you're actually sort of doing a lot of embedding at the same time, but it's kind of let you to be able to actually do a lot more things than OpenAI. If you go for the free account, it kind of cuts you down and then you have to wait for the next day to be able to actually sort of play around with it. So we currently have those two, and then we're leveraging basically OpenLMs that have OpenAI compatible models to be able to actually do some of the work. I was saying before, basically, we've removed all the API limits. The other thing we're going to do basically is remove as well in the future the way we count API requests in Claris Connect. So currently in Claris Connect, everything is counted against the API request. But if you're basically working between FileMaker and Claris Connect, you're still incurring the cost of the API request, even though you're just getting FileMaker to talk to Connect. So we're going to remove those. So anything that is Claris related inside your Claris Connect won't be connected. Your API request will only count against third-party connectors that we have with the outside, so that when you're talking to Google, Microsoft, whatever, that's where the API request will be used, but everything else will actually sort of stay inside it. So if you want to use the Claris Connect utilities to be able to do whatever that things you could do in FileMaker, but it's going to work better in Connect, now it's completely free of charge and unlimited. So we're hoping people actually have to be able to actually play with that. Other update that we did is now OData is our OData service is fully 4.0.1 compliant. It was before there was a couple of stuff that went there, but basically now all the work has been done and it's fully compliant. So hopefully anyone using, and John using quite a lot of the OData, but if anyone's looking to actually start jumping on the bandwagon of OData, now's the time to be able to actually sort of play with it. Like we're saying, basically, open quickly is something that we worked on kind of heavily based on the feedback because we want to make sure that people use it and see the benefit beyond it. Other thing that we did, so there was a lot of small updates that we put in there. I've only listed some of the bigger ones because I know that that's going to have interest from people, and from the ETNS, people were actually kind of lacking it. So the first one is essentially a new script steps, which is execute SQL error. So basically is what it's doing. It's the same. It does exactly the same execute SQL, but now it's going to give you the error, a proper error. So whether before you had the exclamation mark when there's an issue, now it's going to give you the full error of what's actually going on. The reason we actually built it was because we had people requesting it, but sometimes at Claris we're a bit selfish, and we had to actually get this to be able to work better with LLMs. So even though people have been asking for a long time, and even we listen to the request, this is for us to make better work around the LLM. So it was actually kind of selfish on our part, and the reason we actually sort of did that. The other one is around layout and themes and how they work. So now you're going to be able to actually set up a default themes for the file It's not across the app, it's really basically on the file level, but at least whenever you create a new layout, it's not they're going to use the Apex Blue default theme. You're going to be able to actually set up your own default theme and use that across all your layouts. Kind of useful. On top of that, now you'll be able to remove completely the classic theme if it's basically still stored in your layout themes. So it was there, and we never basically enabled the on switch with this. So that's going to go through. Based on feedback that we have, we've actually changed a little of the default scripts settings. So a lot of them were actually on off, and we've actually turned them basically onto on. So it's not going to affect your current script. So if you basically put it to off, it's going to stay on off. But now when you create a new script and you add a new script steps that has a default option set to off, in a lot of cases now it's going to be set to on. So it's only applying to your new script. It's not going to touch any of the script that you actually had in the past. One of the other one that we did was basically enabling PSOS to be called directly from the from actually FileMaker server and from the scheduling environment. So PSOS can actually call PSOS, which is kind of cool when you want to basically run a daily task on the server before you sometimes had to actually have robot and stuff like that. So now you're going to be able to actually basically have scripts running and calling PSOS directly and running that from the scheduled environment inside your admin console and FileMaker server. We've changed, well, we actually added basically this on the revert transaction so that you can control a bit better how the errors actually handled when you're reverting transactions, when there's an error. In the past, it was just basically a ban on transaction. Now you can get it to actually keep on going through the transaction, even if there is an error in the system. And then for the open transactions, we've added a way to be able to skip the alternative options, which was a popular request from a lot of developers. Bit of a change that we did on the layer calculation. So this is basically the V3 where we got to. Whilst we were doing some work on the save a copy as XML and how we basically gonna expose basically how the layer calculation were actually working, we did some kind of work because there was one of the issues that we had in terms of localization. So if you basically, because the local layout calculation was just text on the layout, if you were moving basically from a German version to the English version, it was in a lot of cases actually using updating itself because the text was actually sort of just text, and there was no way for the engine to be able to actually sort of change the fields that you were calling or any of the script steps that basically were called in that layout calculation. So we changed it in the background. We created basically a way to be able to actually create chunks out of the layout calculation so that whenever a change was made to actually the name of a table or whatever, it could basically refresh the layout calculation in a better way. And it's helping us basically at the same time extract more information inside the XML so that we have now these new options to be able to have DDR info when you do a save a copy as XML, where you're going to be able to actually see pretty much all the information of where all the script steps and everything's been called. And so it's going to be, it's going to enable a lot of the analysis tools to give you a lot more information about how your system works. And hopefully should actually make troubleshooting a bit better, especially when using Inspector Pro or FM Perception or Base Element or all the tools out there. And the last one is kind of a small one, but basically was something, again, coming back from the work that we're doing with AI around when you have a constraint found set, it has currently it has to go through the index to be able to actually sort of redo the search. And what we did realize when, let's say you have a table that has 1 million record, and then you go through and then you come up with 200 records, and then you just want to search through those 200 records. In the past, it still had to actually go through the index to be able to actually do the find. And so we have a new option now where the constraint found set can do the same find on this constraint record without using the index. So if you're looking through, let's say 200 records out of 1 million, it's only going to look at the data for 200 records. It's not going to have to actually sort of go through the index. So it should be a lot quicker. Again, depending on how you're actually using the system, it could actually work for your benefit, or in cases it's not going to have any benefit for you, so it's not going to work. But what we're looking for is when we have more feedback, we want to see whether we can actually do better things in the background to actually just speed up the way that actually kind of works. Again, so there's a lot of security update that we've done. So HTTP alternating actually working now on everything. For the Windows side, it's going to work only if you use Nginx. So if the company or your company has to actually have and use the Windows Internet Services, we won't be able to actually support that. It's because of the way that Nginx actually allows us to actually do more things. And for us, it's easier just to actually have to manage Nginx updates and the Apache updates versus doing through multiple setup. The admin API is going to be able to actually enable it, disable it. We've made it easier to be able to actually upload a certificate via the admin API, essentially around the way that the PAM certificate was actually sort of sent through the API. There was an issue with carriage returns, and that actually works a lot better with that. And then again, we update a lot of our libraries in the background because of security updates. Kind of important that we have everything always set at with the latest version. We've added a couple of stuff on the admin console as well. There's an option to be able to actually view the JDK version that you have. We made it easier for people to be able to update the JDK inside the admin console. We've added a couple of options on controlling which kind of file can be open when you do restart. The enterprise license key being obfuscated essentially is for hosting providers, SBA providers, large organizations where they don't want the end users to be able to actually see the enterprise license key. And then we've made it easier for people to be able to create subfolders inside the main console so that when you want to update file to a specific area, you can actually use that through the admin console to make it easier for you. For the execute data API, we've all made the update that was basically a bit of an issue where you could actually have control over how the modification of data could be done if you had options set up in FileMaker Pro. So now we're basically giving more control over that through the data API or the execute data API. On WebDirect, we wanted to actually give it a different name, but actually because of the limitation, we said, well, actually, we're just going to support on-object keystrokes and on-layout keystrokes in WebDirect, so that now if you're using the return, the enter, and the escape keys, you could actually get the solution to do something very specific for you. So if someone types data inside the text field and return, you can actually get it to actually run a script after you. It's going to run only for the 3 keys. We were thinking of actually doing on more keys, but because of issues in the background for the time being, it's going to be limited to those 3 keys. And as like I was saying before, you can actually get the FileMaker script engine to actually call psource directly from Intel. The FileMaker developer tool as well is being updated. So it's going to allow you to be able to support bloating databases to folders. And then we're having 2 new options, one called sort by size and the other one called query by size or query size. Essentially, it allows you to be able to get the size of a field inside a table or multiple fields inside the table. And it will give you basically the size of the data stored inside that field. And at the same time, it will give you the size of the value index. And it can give you as well the size of the word index for that field. So if you want to have more information of how much data is actually stored in fields, stuff like that, that's basically the reason it's there. The idea behind it basically long term is to be able to give you more information into how much data, how much information is being stored in your system, and how much of that is being used when FileMaker Pro or clients, or FileMaker Server and FileMaker clients work together. Like everyone knows, FileMaker is very chatty. We have a few tools that actually give you the idea of remote calls and stuff like that, but it's kind of hard to be able to figure out when you're creating a layout, how much data is really going to go through in that layout. So if you have 4 tools, you can't really sort of figure out how much data is going through. So the idea is once we have those tools done in a better way, the background, we can actually sort of give you an idea of how much data from the server to the client is being sort of pulled in order to actually just get the view of the data on your system. So we're hoping that in a few sort of versions, we'll be able to give you more information of this is what the app actually is doing, and this is the amount of information that's being fed when you're doing calls. FileMaker Go, not big sort of just bug fixes that we've done. It's fully certified for iOS 18. We fixed the issue where FileMaker Go was really working properly with barcode scanning when you had Stage Manager running, and we've added a couple of languages for the get live text. And then a bonus, so basically on the Connect side, we've added Claris Studio connector, and then we're going to have new triggers, new action coming in the not too distant sort of future. We've made it easier for people to be able to figure out the amount of steps being run into every flow. We finally put the new logos because they weren't there. We have a new HTTP utility that's going to reply all the stuff in JSON. There's a few sort of UI fixes. And the one thing which is kind of useful is the data retention policy has been increased to 135 days. So if you have a paid account of Claris Connect and then you close it, but you need to get your data back, before you had 45 days to actually get the data back. Now it's going to stay for 135 days. If you have a free tier of Claris Connect, or if you have a Claris Connect NFR as a partner, then that doesn't actually matter because your account will live till 2099. So there won't be actually too many issues with that. That basically, so in summary, this is what we're going to basically ship in 21.1. We're hoping to actually sort of get more traction on semantic search. There was a couple of nice session at the Rome FileMaker Week on AI. People were talking about it. So we trying to actually sort of muster more work for more developers and more companies to start going, okay, I need to actually look at really what I can do with AI, because even though there's a lot of marketing hype around sort of what it can do, it's going to be important for people to actually understand there's some very benefic use cases of leveraging AI inside their solutions. And then, like everything as a .1 version, a lot of improvement for developers based on the feedback that you've submitted. So there was a lot of information. If you duplicate the existing previous set, does it show the new checkbox? I think it does. When you do a duplicate privilege set, it will keep whatever's out there. So you'll just have to go inside it and actually remove it to actually get it to work.
So that would be awesome, and arguably easier to implement, because you're instantiating a privilege set. You just compose a checkbox onto it, because that would, by the way, terrific progress. Enjoyed the presentation. Nice to see things moving forward with the open quickly. But that checkbox, if you have a complicated privilege set, asking someone, that drills down into the deep levels, that'd be massively complicated to recreate that. That'd be a bit of a blocker. So if duplicating a privilege set does cause the checkbox to appear much in the way anew, that would be awesome. And if not, it might be relatively easy to code.
Yeah, I think the only one where you can't actually, the only one that you can't duplicate is the full admin, but all the others, basically, you can actually duplicate them. And
oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, the complicated ones would be the ones where the privilege bits are like drilled down deep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Tables, this, that. If you could dupe those, you're really going to kind of let people move forward on the platform and sell more licenses.
Yeah. Let me see. You can. Yeah, so we'll have to go down to the custom recalled privileges. Okay. Cool. I'll talk to the guys actually work on it just to see how.
Yeah, it's just instantiate an object and compose the checkbox in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Rapid talk through there, Doug. And it sounds like there's a real lot to get our teeth into in that lot. So looks like a good update. I'm looking forward to it. And thank you very much for coming along to give us that. Anyone got any questions quickly before I take us back to Kate? And thank you for stepping in whilst Kate was otherwise occupied.
Doug, I had a question which I asked somewhere else the other day. With the new open quickly in the relationship graph, if you are working on somebody else's file, which was the case, where they've used anchor buoy extensively, and obviously the anchor part usually just has a very short, like 3 or 4 letters is the name. Everything else off it to the right has an underscore with something else on, so is longer. So in the example I was using, I said, oh, if you search for app, for application app, then the actual app is at the bottom of the list, and you can't type any more to get to it because it doesn't have any more. And in this case, there was like 30 or 40 sub-children that had app underscore something, app underscore something, something. So it meant while it was kind of useful, you then still had to scroll a very long way down to find the thing you were really after. I just wanted you to take that back to people because it would be really helpful if we had a way of sorting that information, not by whatever your the default is, so that we can get to table occurrences that are very short names at the top of the list as opposed to it being at the bottom.
Yeah. The one thing we were trying to actually do, and we probably might see whether we can do it for the next update, is similar to Spotlight, where you have the icons at different types, is basically have that below. So when you do the search, you can click and say, I just want basically have table occurrences. And then with that, a sort order where you can actually specifically select the order that you want to do. So
okay, thank you.
It might take a bit more time to actually do sort, but actually the data is actually in the system, so it shouldn't actually be too much of a pain. It's just we were just trying to actually get this out of the door as quickly as we could to get people to start using it.
Anyone else got any questions? I think family is proving slightly interruptive for Kate. So and we're a bit over on time as well at the moment. So I think the best thing to do would be to delay Kate's talk until the next meeting, because it was shaping up to be really interesting, I think. So what I'll do is I'll put that in the January meeting. So thank you, Kate. Thank you very much. And thank you, Doug. That was brilliant. It's great to see that.
If they're going to be new Connect things by next month, then maybe that's also very good.
Yeah, that could tie in nicely.
Yes.
Doug? Can't you say anything? Would you like me to turn the recording off?
No. Well, we're working really as quickly as we can to be able to actually remove those API request limits, because we really want to get people to start leveraging Connect, and even if it's just at least FileMaker to Connect or Connect to see or whatever, we want to get people to start going and going, okay, I can use it because it has meaning for me, and we know that putting data limits to everything has always been an issue, and so the idea is as quickly as we can remove those issues, we're going to get more people to start leveraging it. And then we have a uptake of people leveraging it, and then we have more feedback, and then we can work quicker on fixing bugs. So yeah, it should come out very soon, and that way there's like, even in terms of some of the work that we talked back in Engage, in leveraging Connect to be kind of a version controlling environment for scripts. Once we basically remove limits, it's a lot easier to be able to actually sort of get the process running and get people to go, okay, I'm going to give it a try and see whether it's going to work for me. So that's what we want to get to as quickly as we can.
Right. Is there anything anyone wants to raise or ask before I turn the recording off and we move to just discussion in the virtual bar? or are you happy for me to return the recording off? That all looks good. We can always put it in the chat if something wants to be included with the recording of this. So I'm going to stop recording, and thank you very much. Before I do that, thank you very much to everyone who's contributed today. Thank you to James, who's unfortunately had to go. Thank you, John. Thanks, Kate. We'll hear more from you next time. Thank you, Doug. And thank you everyone who contributed. I just have to say this meeting is made by you, not by me. I just try to hang it all together. So I'm really grateful for all of you for coming along today and making this meeting as great as it is, I think.